Welcome to our podcast. Today, our topic is the leadership of adaptability and inclusion within global organizations. Um, Today, we have Lee Norris. Lee, where would we find you today?
Well, I've been traveling in Netherlands, Amsterdam, and other places, but today you'll find me back in Bristol in the UK.
Beautiful. And my name is Dawna Atamanchuk, and you find me here in Winnipeg, Manitoba. We are our Canadian counterpart here. So we are excited to jump into the topic of looking at global organizations, adaptability, and inclusion. So it depends on how you're going to read the sentence and what you're going to take away from it. But Lee and I are looking forward to just sort of spurring some conversation between us and with you. So please remember, you can always post questions and ideas, and we would love to hear from you. So Lee, I think our first question is, what is a global, or what do we mean by a global organization? And what do you think of that?
Do you know, the first thing that came to mind for me is that lots of organizations are more global than they think these days, largely driven by social media. If you're putting stuff on social media, it's kind of global.
Mm-hmm.
And another part of me was thinking that people, not everybody, but people travel. And I was thinking about one of our strange ways we picked up some work was from, so we're based in the UK, but one of our clients was in Canada visiting a sister and was talking about some stuff, and then her sister said, "Oh, have you ever heard of Change Innovators?" And that led to, so that was a holiday conversation that led to a really, really lovely and interesting piece of work for us. So it kind of took me to different places, right? Recognizing also that not every organization is global, but people are global as well as organizations. That's kind of one place I went to.
Well, that is an interesting, that is that point though, right? So people are global, so an individual themselves could have moved to a country, an individual could be first generation. An individual could have spent many months. Maybe they spend the summers with their grandparents growing up in another country, and then they come back for the school year. And so all that concept of globalization and thinking about how do they sort of fit together or mix together really does impact the way people see things, interpret things, and what they know.
Yeah, and it's strange how sometimes these connections that we make pan out. I think it's in part what we sometimes call the ripple effect.
Mm-hmm.
That people they remember, they're affected by, they have fond memories of some of the things that we do when we meet them, and that can have a ripple effect.
It's when you stop to think about that global organization, and even, we could even look at the way we have organizations felt today on our podcast here. And even just the thoughts of sometimes on some of the small things of being a global organization versus some of the bigger things that actually can occur. So I find the love of wanting to understand people and who they are, and actually wanting to get to know people that are different than you, that have different stories and different things, can really spur some interesting opportunities at work.
I'm glad you mentioned the title, because I think when I posted the live stream on LinkedIn, I spelled it with a Z, and then when I put the question in, I changed it back to an S. So we're doing a really global podcast at the moment, on the basis of how we spell organizations, and talking about stories. We work for a global organization.
We do.
Yeah, we've got our own story, and lots of the people that we work with have stories. And I've been lucky enough to work with people in Canada, and hopefully soon to work with some folk in Australia and India, and in Europe. I'm already there. So it's just for me, it's interesting what that means, because without the people and the work that we do, we wouldn't be global. Some people may have heard of us globally, but we wouldn't be working globally unless it was for the work that we do in the interactions that we have, which I think is interesting. It's not about making money. in that sense. It's about reach, and it's about bringing some of what we believe is a good way to engage in leadership around the world, and testing whether or not that's true.
So why don't we move to the next question?
Right. Well, let's do. Oh, that's a really great. So the next question was, what does adaptability actually look like? I'm going to ask you this question.
Well, I would love to answer this one. So I'm curious if people that are listening to think about, what does adaptability mean to you? And adaptability is that idea of us to actually be able to start to challenge the way we see things or how we do things. The ability, that adaptability, not just of a task or an action, but actually my mindset of how I see something or how something should be done. And so that ability to actually start thinking, like, what's the multiple ways that we can actually start to do something? We often will say, well, we could do it this way or that way. But for me, the adaptability actually comes to stopping and starting to break down the emotional component and attachment that we may have to actually doing things. So many people will say, or they will have had a Sunday dinner. I think of Sunday dinners, and the table was set a certain way. People had a certain place to sit. There were certain expectations of things. And adaptability is thinking about how all that could be done differently, but actually separating myself from the emotion of it. So maybe there's been something you've used and it has tradition really embedded in it. It's really part of it. And then how is it that I could actually start to think about adaptability? How can I start thinking and being emotionally attached to it in a different way so that therefore things can show up differently? Adaptability is more than doing something differently. From what I've experienced and what my research, it's adaptability is that space of being able to start to emotionally change, but then also start to move. So thoughts on that, Lee? There's a couple of thoughts to share, but I'd love to.
Yeah, I think what you've reminded me of is it's a very personal thing. Sometimes we can talk about change as if it's something that people, within the organization need to change. Then we need to be more adaptable.
Yeah.
I think sometimes what gets lost in that is that adaptability is a very personal thing. And I worked on some really large change type of activities previously, and there is a concept of something called your kind of unspoken contract, or the social contract that people have. And it's where I park my car, which desk I sit at, where I like to go to find a quiet spot. There's lots of different things that aren't part of the actual contract, and you don't really know that they're there. They're quite unconscious or subconscious, and but when you've broken one of those contracts, when you've moved the desks away from the windows and people can't sit there anymore, you've blocked the path, or the policy gets changed to you can't park your car on site anymore, you have to XYZ. So that what I think is really interesting for me about that is that it, as you said, it throws up a huge amount of emotion for people. We feel adaptability. We don't just do adaptability.
Yes.
So
globally, start inviting new people to meetings. Maybe in one organization, certain people are invited. In another organization, certain people are invited. And emotionally trying to even connect to, why is somebody here or why is somebody not here in a meeting or a team event? That in itself is a huge level of adaptability, because now we're changing the chess pieces, and how do we play them, and how do they actually work and function. And my safety net is no longer been invited to this meeting. So not only has the meeting changed, but my safety net, my safety, you said social contracts, my social relationships that make feel protective at work are actually been taken away as well.
Absolutely. And I'd like to think that we're paying more attention to those things these days, that how challenging it can be for people, and recognizing that adaptability is a choice, but that choice can be quite hard, because, as you say, it can be kind of almost plasticized, deeply ingrained in us. It's that it's a bit like when you for those people that still do drive to work, if you were driving to work, you might follow a route, or if you're on a site and you might follow a route, you don't really notice when that route is available to you. You can kind of do other things as well. You're in the flow often. It's when that gets interrupted and you can't go the route that you normally would, that there is, believe it or not, an emotional response to having to make that change.
Small twitch in the brain, right? The small twitch in the brain is being triggered somehow.
Yeah.
Yes.
And some of the things that we ask of people are really, really huge.
Yes.
You can't work here anymore, or the way that where you sit within the organization is no longer going to be the same, and that stirs up huge amounts of emotion. And our ability to lean into those things with intelligence is, I think, really starting to emerge in a much more loud way. The expectations that people have around those things are people want more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know whether, and I think personally, I think it's a good thing. But
well, I think both of us are both individuals who thrive in this space, and the thing that, from a conversational perspective between you and I, that is intriguing is the awareness of acknowledging yourself that I am interested in this new thing. It's just acknowledging in myself that it's not easy, but it's actually something that I want.
mm-hmm.
When we start to think about the adaptability, and when I think on the global boards I sit on, or when I'm in the global space at work or outside of work, it's an acknowledging that, oh, we're starting the meeting in a different way. Not right or wrong, but it's different. Or the way this group is working through something is something I've never experienced before. This is different. Okay, let's step into it. Or let
Mm-hmm.
me learn why. Or afterwards, it's like, okay, I'm going to find somebody who I trust and I feel confident that I can ask some questions to start to understand from a global perspective what is taking place that no one's talking about. Like, what
Mm-hmm.
is going on? So then emotionally, I'm able to start to connect. But I find the fact that it's different, but that opportunity to sort of acknowledge that it's not easy for us always, and we have to
Mm-hmm.
stretch ourselves, then can start to allow us to find some new resources to step into that adaptability, because I don't always have them myself, because I don't understand what's going on. And for me, once I understand that I can't maybe work through something myself, I can take the actions and emotional, but I need somebody to maybe step into that space of letting me learn more. Like, I need to learn. I need to learn in order to be adaptable. I just can't adapt.
Mm.
And I'm next week,
Yeah.
when I go away for my board meetings, we'll be with a new group. I know there's going to be a lot of what we're talking about, but in a really good way, because I'm excited to work with everybody. But there's going to be that adaptability. And then there's going to be the next question, which is in regards to the idea of inclusion. We were
Let's
hoping to look at.
bring that one up as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do we mean by inclusion in this context? What do you think, Lee?
Well, there's a strong narrative around inclusion that is largely reflected in legislation, around protected characteristics. I don't think that's what we mean. We include that, but I think there is a feeling, a genuine feeling. You talked about belonging, and belonging is a feeling, but I think I think in some ways that word also can be quite challenging because it gets used a lot.
What word comes to mind for you?
I think, you know what, I don't think a word comes to mind. I think one of the things that's really been interesting for me as I've been doing more of the work that we do, especially when we deep dive into some of the kind of behavioral psychology and the motivation and values psychology and EQ as well, is that some of the way we are is really deeply ingrained. Behaviors are really deeply ingrained, and the reasons why we feel things and the reasons why we do things are very are not so easily understood. Okay, but I think that, you know, also that, but those, some of those things are not to do with protected characteristics. They're to do with the way that we're built internally and at a kind of really deep physiological level as well. You know, we've learned some behaviors, we've kind of maybe inherited some behaviors, for example, and there are sometimes when it's just not possible for us to adapt quickly to the way that others want us to adapt. And I think in a leadership position, it's really important to understand that, because otherwise the desire to step in and the desire to control, or the kind of the feeling that we need to, you know, push people down a particular route becomes the way, and it stifles inclusion, it stifles adaptability, and the route to understanding that is a deeper level of your own emotional intelligence as to why and what's driving and how you feel about some of those things that sometimes you feel compelled to step into and take control of. You know, lots of situations where people can feel excluded, and it might not have anything to do with anything other than the fact that you're being excluded and people aren't realizing it.
Do you think that it's up to the person? So we're, you know, we're approaching this from a global organization or from a global context. So I just even want you to think about the person you're sitting next to in your cubicle, or the person you're next to on your Teams call or Zoom Square, like even the concept of inclusion and adaptability from those perspectives. But do you think it's up to the person? So if I'm not feeling included with you, is it up to you or is it up to me?
That's a really good question. You know, I'm going to go. One of the things that I really do believe in is that a lot of these challenges and the things that sit around these questions are about a lack of high quality leadership development in organizations. I really do believe that people are not encouraged to really understand more deeply about who they are, and who you are is how you lead. And so therefore, if you understand more about who you are, you might understand more about how you lead. How you lead is the key to, and how open you are to listening to others is the key to unlocking that question, because it's a very, very difficult thing to do if you feel excluded to say in a safe way. I think that is I've always found that really, really difficult. I know that other people find that difficult. And self-awareness in leadership, in particularly senior leadership, and as you work, you know, because ultimately the senior leaders have a huge impact on the culture. I think that, and the behaviors do, I think it comes down to that, and an investment in people, really, truly, and people really taking on board and stepping into that choice about their own personal learning and development is key to answering that question. I really do believe that.
Yeah, I'm the actions. When I think about inclusion, I think about behaviors that we see in people. And I really appreciate your initial comment there, about belonging is maybe, you know, it's just one word. It's really, this topic is like a big salad, right? Or a big stew, or just something that's multiple ingredients in it. But it's the behaviors that the individual themselves chooses to do. It's the reason, the intention of doing them. You know, like, what intention are you doing something, and do people, what does it feel like, as we like to say, and especially Lee likes to say, like, what does it feel like when someone's around you, and what does it feel like for yourself to be doing that? And that's actually that's one of the things I think about when you're looking at emotional intelligence, is like, yes, it's a report. But when you look at that report, maybe it's some idea of what it feels like to be you, but also what it's like, could think about how it feels like for other people to be around you. So the question I just had is, do you think the concept of inclusion, feeling included, is the responsibility of myself, or is it your responsibility? If we are working, when we do work together, do we think inclusion is something that my responsibility, your responsibility, both, or something else?
I think everybody has to be really open to it. I really do think that as well. And I think it is about what you said earlier, is that, you know, how do we truly enter into situations with adaptability? So for example, I know somebody, you know, I had a story around this where, you know, in the culture of the organization was that if you were a more senior person, you could have a laptop. Okay.
Yes.
Now, whereas if you were a less senior person, you had to justify why you needed a laptop. Now, that to me goes to the heart of your question, is that, you know, it's that these things that happen in organizations. So it means that if I have a laptop, I can be really mobile, I can walk around. If I don't have one back in the day, I know everybody has laptops these days, or lots of people do, but you were kind of tied or rooted to a desk.
Yeah.
Now, I you know, how crazy is that? But the narrative was, well, why do you need one? Because you're not a senior manager. Now, that type of situation will happen a lot in organizations, and there's an emotion tied to that, an emotion about seniority, emotion about status, that happens in both directions. Yeah. So I think it's a real conundrum of a question, Dawna, because in the end, what are the circumstances that exist that mean that question has to even be asked? I think that's the challenge. And so surely that comes with people, particularly, and I'm gonna say it, you know, with senior leaders, there's a responsibility that you have to kind of invest in yourself and be open, because otherwise you become, you have the potential, at least, to become the obstacle, to become the limiting factor in an organization's ability to adapt and to be inclusive. Because you won't even be realizing that you're doing it unless you've really taken a deep dive and been really open to understanding some of those things about who you are.
Yeah, you know, it makes me think about when, I mean, it's a long time ago, but when I taught dancing, and, you know, there is a tempo or rhythm of a song, and somebody might know the steps and know the thing, but if it's actually not at the tempo or rhythm that the rest of the group needs so they can do their part of it, then nobody's feeling included in the performance or in the dance. And that ability to really stop to think about, like, what tempo is it that my team needs. You know, we talked about the speed or quickly and adapting, and maybe it's not that people haven't caught up, because that means for me, that's a lacking, but the individual hasn't moved there yet. I prefer that language. And so if we start to think about inclusion, for me, it's like, how do all the pieces come together so that they just sort of, they make a really nice song, but yet maybe we don't know what that remix is. You know, we don't exactly always know. We may start off with an idea, and when we start to think about how we work together globally, we may have some ideas, but if we're only playing one song and we're not willing to maybe put on a new track or speed it up, my question about how are we being adaptable? Are we open to adaptability? And are we creating inclusion is really important. You know, there is nothing worse to me than someone coming up to a table and not feeling like I don't have a seat for them. Like, for me, the other day, I thought I actually was rude to somebody, someone where I was eating, and I went up to the person and I said, I really apologize. I didn't mean to be, it felt like I was rude to you. Like, the way I turned my back to them or the way I moved. And it wasn't meant to be that, but I needed to fix it right away, because I knew that person is somebody I'm going to be seeing in my life for a long time.
Yeah.
And even if not. So to me, it's the tempo of the music. It's how we choose it. Are we stuck on one song, one tempo, or are we really open to different things coming into it? And those are interesting questions, because I don't always know if we're open to a new person at the table. I don't know if we're interested in a new song. I don't know if we're always really interested in those things. I don't know. I know it's a take on it, but to me,
I think,
the actual
I love your
reality of it.
Yeah, and I think the practicality of it in the way that you tell that story is that you show an interest in the fact that it's possible that there was a disconnect, and at your heart you don't want that to happen.
No, I
So
never want that.
stepping into that space to say, look, I'm aware of something, and it could have been the energy, it could have been about you, it could have been nothing, but you're saying, if that happened, I want to make sure that that's not how I want this to be going forward. And
No.
sometimes people say it's about owning it. Again, that's a kind of a term that's used really often. But what does owning it mean in that sense? It's that, I have a value around connecting with other people, and a value about not upsetting people and trying to be whatever it is, including in being inclusive. And I'm going to act on it, and I'm going to do something about it, even if my truth is not the truth. If it's possible that that's happened, how do I lean into that and stop my ego getting in the way of learning? Because the way you also talked about being open to learning, and I think being open to learning is a absolutely critical part of both of these questions.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't think you've got anything to learn, then it's really possible that you're going to struggle to be adapting and being inclusive, because we're going to meet people who have different expectations, different cultures, different worldviews, different everything, and that's okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, but it is really that interesting spot about that learning. And the thing that comes to my mind when we start thinking about this from an individual who has, so I'd like us to think about as an individual, if you're an individual that has a leadership title, or you're an individual on a team that has like the informal leadership role. I'm stuck for which one it is today. Do you know which one it is, Lee? Is it
I think it's informal.
Informal, right? So they don't technically have a title, but people listen to them. So they observe what person ABC is doing, or person XYZ is doing, and that's kind of becomes the unwritten rules of the team. Is the importance of timing when we notice something that could fray the ability for us to have feel that we are welcome at the table.
Mm.
And it was that immediate moment of me realizing when I was having dinner at a large table, there was lots of us. I got distracted because someone else was telling a story and two people. So it was my doing. I was trying to listen to two different things. And the ability to realize I need to fix this soon. I knew right away from my knowledge of my own self-awareness and my EQ, I knew that I needed to do something before I left that day. And so I was very aware of when the server might just have a few minutes on their own when they weren't at a table. And it is that space of what we're talking about here, about not waiting too long, not letting it brew, trying not fix it, but just step into whatever needs to be stepped into so we can have conversations.
Mm.
And it's for me, that timing is really important, because I could have waited until the next time, but I feel sometimes we wait too long, not because we need to slow down, but there are times when a behavior that we need to sort of say, hey, that's not a go here.
Mm.
It's just not, we're not going that way. We're not working that way. We need to nip it.
Mm.
I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I think funnily enough, I was in a conversation yesterday with a group of people, and we were talking about how much of work is actually the relationships.
Tons.
And so people were reflecting on that, in certain sectors, maybe more than others as well. I don't know if that's true, but we sort of explored it a bit. Is that the value of work can be about output and productivity, and not about the value of the relationship. But an awful lot of people's day is about giving people time,
Mm-hmm.
and as far as possible being really fair with it, and then getting to the end of the day and feeling that they've achieved nothing, and that this whole subject really is deeper than we might think, because as Yvonne might say, our founder, we've spent a long time kind of engineering the human being out of work, And so much of the value of work is the connection that we have with others. And where we have amazing connection with others, then overall people are in a more productive state. So, it's and part of that is about our ability to be adaptable, to be flexible, and to recognize what it means to be inclusive, and understand that that's not a destination. It may be with one person or maybe with two people, but the moment you have other people and more people joining, then it's an ongoing process, because you're going to be challenged, and the more global we are, the bigger the opportunity. Not the challenge, because once you've learned some of the basic skills around choosing to be adaptable and choosing to be inclusive, you've got some of the way down the path to understanding, well, this is how I'm going to be, and this is creating the environment where I can do that on a one-to-one. Blimey, this is a big subject, right? It's kind of
it's very big. Yeah, we want to take that opportunity to thank you. Do you want to put the title back up just to make sure that so the leadership of adaptability and inclusion with global organizations. So with an S or a Z, I guess within your organization, you'll get to decide. It's like IOU or IOR. There are some things that we can focus on, but we wanted you to realize that this topic is more than just a flow chart of how we're going to work together. It is really considering the emotional and the human being that is really around all those choices and decisions we make when we choose to work together globally. But I also think that each one of us are some form of a global citizen. We come with our own stories, our own family stories, our own history of travel. Even every time you pick up a book, maybe you've never hopped on an airplane, but maybe you go to the library and you are well versed in stories from around the world or love watching documentaries. I think all those things make us global individuals. And Lee and I are really happy to talk to you today about adaptability and inclusion. And if you'd ever like to reach out to us, you can find us at www.changeinnovators.com. Probably should have just said changeinnovators.com, would have been the proper thing to say. So thank you very much for joining us today. And we hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening. And Lee?
Yeah, I think we were quite brave today stepping into this subject. So I hope we've opened up at least the beginning of it, and forgive us if we've kind of gone to places that were a little bit less comfortable. But nonetheless, really important to keep these conversations going. I really appreciate you, Dawna, and we'll get this up on our live stream podcast as well. So fabulous for those who've joined, and for those that join us for this discussion in future. Okay.
Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Ciao.
Take care. Bye.